Gordon Smith, the schools. Tonight, what we'd like to do is really continue to provide as much information as we can about the school building project that will hopefully happen at East Longmeadow High School. But right now we're in a feasibility study, and tonight what we'd like to do is just give you some information about that whole process. Everybody hear me all right with this microphone? Okay, beautiful. So tonight, before I introduce everybody who's up here, we want to just give you an introduction, let you know that this process has been something actually that's been almost part of my entire tenure as superintendent, because we began looking at East Longmeadow High School and all of our buildings with a facility study back in 2013. And that facility study actually was developed and completed by Sims, Maney, and McKee Architects. And now Sims, Maney, and McKee Architects have joined us again with Jones Whitsitt Architects as part of our design team looking at the potential project. But that facility study really helped us do all our capital planning for the buildings, all 5 buildings, including the high school, really for the last 10 years. But now this feasibility study is focusing on the high school. And so it's been a long journey. Tonight, we want to review that journey with you, but tell you where we're going, give you an idea of the Mass School Building Authority process, give you an idea of where we've been with visioning and priorities for this project, go through existing conditions, sorry about that, review some of the options that the school building committee is discussing and starting to get into specifics on, and then open it up, get some questions. But also I saw all of you taking a look at our easels around the room. And that's really what we want to do, is give you time to look at those and give us an idea of things you like and things maybe you're not as wild about. So we'll get this kicked off and we'll introduce folks up here. First, let me introduce the presenters this evening. We have Mr. Ben Wheeler from Skanska. Ben Murphy, I'm sorry. Close enough, I'll take it. Hi there, everyone. Sorry, Ben. All good. Ben Murphy from Skanska. Ben Wheeler was an 8th grader I taught in English. Back in Hingham Middle School in the 90s. So with that, at least we have some comical relief. We have Christian Whitsitt from Jones Whitsitt Architects. And we have Eric Vangness, did I say that correctly, Eric? All right, who not only is with Sims, Maney, and McKee Architects, but is a graduate of East Longmeadow High School. So we're excited to have Eric with us. And also from Jones Whitsitt, we have Jillian DeCourcy. And we have from Sims, Maney, and McKee Architects, we have Helen Fantini. So those are members of our owner project manager team and members of our design team. Now let me introduce our building committee. We'll start over here with our chair, Mr. Stephen Crucial.
Good evening.
We have Mr. Bruce Fenney.
Hello, everyone.
We have Mr. Ryan Quimby.
Hello.
Sounds so quiet. Applause or something. We have Mr. Stephen Lonergan. We have Ms. Mary McNally. Over on this side, we have Mr. Greg Thompson, Ms. Kathy Hill, Ms. Pamela Blair, and Ms. Elizabeth Margin Boucher. So these are our building committee members. And they're the ones who, over the last few months, have really been discussing, looking at different options, debating. If you've watched any of our meetings, generally they'll go anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, but really trying to get into the specifics to provide the best options and solutions for all of you. With that said, I think I'm starting to hand off to Mr. Ben Murphy.
I believe so. Thank you, Gordon. I am Ben Murphy with Skanska. I represent the owner's project manager for the East Longmeadow High School project. So very excited to be part of the team here. And as owner's project manager for the East Longmeadow High School project, our main role is to serve as a liaison between the town of East Longmeadow and the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And so what is the Mass School Building Authority? So you'll hear me refer to it as MSBA from here on out because it's kind of a mouthful. So the MSBA, their mission statement states that they are a quasi-independent government authority created to reform the process of funding capital improvement projects in the Commonwealth's public schools. The MSBA strives to work with local communities to create affordable, sustainable, and energy efficient schools across Massachusetts. Quite the mouthful. In simpler terms, MSBA is the town of East Long Meadow's partner that is partnered with the town to provide grant reimbursement for the high school project and all eligible costs associated with it. So where does the grant money come from? So the MSBA was enacted by state legislature back in 2004. Since then, they have had a revenue stream of 1 penny of the state's 6.25% sales tax. And MSBA has paid over $16 billion to districts across the state for public K through 12 construction projects. That means that if you pay taxes in the state of Massachusetts, which I'm sure most of you do, your state tax dollars have already been in use in hundreds of districts across the Commonwealth in capital improvement projects. Now it's time for the town of East Long Meadow to capitalize on this unique opportunity and invest in your town's current and future educational needs. In order to maintain eligibility for MSBA's grant participation, the town must satisfy all MSBA's requirements. And MSBA has a really prescribed process that we need to follow, which is categorized by 7 different modules. And I'll provide an overview of all the modules and just the broad overview of the entire process in a few slides. But our team found it important to first start off tonight and show you folks where we are at currently in the whole process. So currently, if you take a look at the screen, we are in the feasibility study, which is module 3. The feasibility study is the earliest and most critical part of the design phase or design process, that is. It involves information gathering, assessment of the existing building and site conditions that Gordon alluded to, establishment of the district's goals and objectives for the project, and definition of the district's educational and community programming needs. So it really is setting the foundation for the rest of the project. And so to complicate things a little bit here, the feasibility study is broken up into 2 subphases, the first of which is the preliminary design program. PDP, you'll hear me refer to it as. And so our team began developing the PDP back in May of this year, once the OPM Skanska and the architect, Jones Wissett Architects in association with Sims Maney and McKee Architects were chosen to join the team. We submitted the PDP package to MSBA on August 30th, and we're currently awaiting their review comments. They have a 21-day review period, and then they'll provide us some comments. I think we're actually expecting those next week. And we are now we've jumped into the preferred schematic report phase, which is that second subphase category of feasibility study. The goal for the PSR phase is to evaluate the 4 options that were approved by the school building school building committee, the East Long Meadow High School Building Committee, that is. There were 4 options that were approved in the PDP package that are now going to be further analyzed and evaluated in the preferred schematic report phase. But the overall goal through this development of those 4 options is to kind of grow consensus to learn more information about each one of the project options, but ultimately at the end of this phase for the town to select the one that is most advantageous to the district, both financially and educationally. And so our goal is to submit the preferred schematic report to MSBA in February of 2023. And that will queue up the MSBA review process, kind of like what they're doing right now with our PDP submission. So another standard 21 days. And then we'll get the comments back and address those. And then that is all aimed at a MSBA Board of Directors meeting, which will be for the approval of the preferred schematic report And we are targeting April 2023. That is a known published scheduled MSBA date. And that will allow us to jump into module 4, which is schematic design. And so just a caveat on the schedule here. It is subject to change. We are very early on in the process. Depending on the determinations of the district as we move forward, some things could shift, but this is our best bet right now. So once our team receives approval of the preferred schematic report, the PSR, in April, we'll shift focus to the schematic design phase, where we will be further developing the scope and design of that one preferred project solution or option. So we plan to submit schematic design to MSBA in August of 2023. That will queue up their review period. And you'll notice here we have from August 2023 to October of 2023 shown as MSBA review. This is kind of a lengthier process for us, or a point in the project for us, because it's actually where we'll start to establish, well, we will establish the project scope and budget for the project. And so that's going to be the time where we have a true representation of what this project means financially to the town citizens. That's where we define all of the scope, we know what the schedule is, and we ultimately have to arrive at a project budget. From there, the project budget, we will be looking for, once that's established, we will be looking for a town vote to approve the full project budget in November at the town's regular election. And so this is that just broad overview, high level linear depiction that I was talking about before. You'll see module 1 is coined eligibility period. That's ultimately where the town was accepted into the MSBA program. Their statement of interest was accepted for the high school building. And you'll see that's also where the school building commission was formed. And then from there into module 2, which is known as forming the project team, you'll see that's where December of 2021, Skanska was hired. We then helped the town issue a request for services for an architect. And then that brought Jones Whitsitt Architects and Msba McKee on board. So in May of 2022 is when we really started this design process. You'll see where the feasibility is at. Below the line, we have our PDP report, which was submitted once again in August of this year. We're waiting feedback from that from the MSBA. And then above the line here, you'll see that we once again are targeting February of 2023 for our next phase, the PSR, the preferred schematic report. We have April 2023 for the MSBA PSR approval. And then once again, we'll get to November of next year where we will be targeting a bond authorization for the full project budget. So assuming a overall approval for the project, we will then start to work our way into detailed design, which is essentially building out all the design documents for the project, which eventually leads you to construction, which we have slotted to take place in July of 2024 to May of 2027. Once again, there are some assumptions being made with this schedule as of right now, but we do know that it's important for the town to start the regular school year in whatever new building or project we do deliver in the fall of 2026 and not like in between semesters. So we are showing a move-in date occupancy of the building in August of 2026. And so follow-up work would be demolition of the old building and any associated field work or hardscape work that we would do after that. And so I'm just kind of breezing through each one of these phases, but we just wanted to highlight some of the key tasks that have been completed by the project team to date. So the school district has successfully established funding for the feasibility study and schematic design, which allows us to carry out this investigative portion of the project and hopefully deliver it into something real. hired an owner's project manager, yours truly, an architect, and drafted the district's ed plan for inclusion in the preliminary design program. The design team has conducted the visioning process, the educational visioning process, that is. They've helped the district draft the educational plan. They've provided initial assessment of the existing conditions at the building and site. And they've drafted the preliminary schemes that you're going to be seeing tonight as well, and provided cost estimates for those four options. So with that said, I'd like to turn it back, I believe, to you, Gordon. Sorry, I think you thought you were done for the night, but here you go again.
Never finished, Ben, never finished. So Ben had alluded to the visioning process. So as we were able to bring Jones Whitsitt Architects in association with Sims Maney McKee Architects on in the spring, we hit the ground running. As you know, at the end of the school year, late May, early June, that's a time where there's very little going on in schools. There are no activities, really nothing going on. So we had a lot of time. I'm being sarcastic. You can laugh. We had to find time in that busy time at the end of the school year to really start to take a look at what could this project look like. And with the help of the design team and Skanska, we did have one public forum and then 3 visioning workshops where we brought people together and really started to look at what could this project look like. And the nice thing about all of that, you had the 3 workshops. You also had multiple interviews with the high school faculty. And then in August, we had a stand out at National Night Out. We started to get community input. And out of all of that, what I'd like you to focus on is that in all the different groups, bless you, the elements or the items, the themes of having a building that's student-centered, that's community welcoming, that's collaborative, and supportive of the programs that are going on academically, but then also is a community building that's supportive of different things that are going on in the community. Those themes crossed over. If you go to the next slide, you see some of these same themes. This is now getting into some of the surveys that went out, not only a National Night Out, but we're online, that we're looking for, if you look in the middle there in small print, a safe, welcoming environment. But we're also looking for an environment that's going to push our students and put them in the best possible situation to have the greatest opportunity to grow academically, socially, and emotionally, and not only collaborate with each other and their teachers, but collaborate with the town, and a building that can go for another 60 years. Current building 62, we'd like to see this building go at least another 60 years. And so all these themes crossed over a few different groups as we started to get community input. Ben also alluded to in the PDP, we put together a look at what's currently going on in terms of the educational program at East Long Meadow High School, and where do we think that program's going. And as we put that together, we really took a look at, so what are our goals and priorities? And first and foremost, we're always looking to put our students in a situation where they're going to be prepared as they finish off their career in the East Long Meadow Public Schools, and more specifically at East Long Meadow High School, that they're prepared to meet the challenges of tomorrow. So what does that mean? Is that just a catchphrase? How do we do that? Well, what it means is that throughout ELPS, we have to focus on the whole child and make sure that we're not just looking at academics, but we're looking at how academics, social, and emotional growth all come together in what we do with all of our programming. It means that we give them plenty of opportunities to develop collaborative leadership. It means that We're looking to create learning experience and learning environments that are rooted in universal design for learning, which basically means that you have to look at the learners in front of you and not try to necessarily force one way of learning, but adapt to how the learners in front of you learn. And then make sure that throughout we're using culturally responsive teaching and supporting our students to develop the knowledge, the skills, and here's where we bring it full circle, the skills, academic, social, and emotional, and the mindset to become resilient and culturally proficient citizens when they leave us. That's the goal and the focus. And what we're doing as we look at all of this is to make sure that the building in which we're doing all of this supports those activities to the best extent possible.
Is it?
Control there.
Yeah, it's just not budgeting.
It'll be on.
Yeah, got to turn it back on.
Can't get my finger.
You just show that one.
Okay. All right, and I'll try and. Is that okay? Can everyone hear me okay? My name's Eric.
Closer, Eric, please.
Okay. My name's Eric Vangsness. I'm a landscape architect. No, jeepers creepers.
We're working.
There you go, man. Gotcha.
Not a good start.
There it is.
My name is Eric Vangsness. I'm a landscape architect with SMMA. What we'd like to do is start by introducing everybody to the site from, let's say, 10,000 feet, right? As a design team, what we like to do is take a look from the air down at these properties to see not just what's going on the property, but what's happening around the property. And we do this so that we can look at things to be sensitive of as we design the site and also opportunities for connections. So what we're looking at right here is an aerial photograph of the campus. And as you can see, as many know here today, there's residential properties to the west, Maple Street, which the existing school fronts on to the north, along with additional residential properties to the north. We have St. Michael's Parish to the east. That parking lot serves as overflow to the site during large events. And then we have a series of wooded resource areas to the east and also down to the south. And also down to the south, there are some industrial properties and some additional residences. So we look at these as opportunities. You know, to the east, we have the bike path, and could there be a potential opportunity to connect from the school property to the bike path? These are some of the connections that we look at. On the site, what we like to always do is start out with, well, what's the good? You know, what are the good things that we see on site? And I think the first one that really stands out, this property is an incredible community resource. It always has been. The high school is basically a building set within a large green park. And there aren't many communities that can say that they have something like that. And it's not so, you know, the primary function, yes, is the school. But as we all know, the secondary function is that it's a community space for things such as summer concerts and the fireworks display and some logistics with the annual parade, and even things like just a, you know, after school walk around the track or around the property. It's really a tremendous park and a tremendous property. And one of the other components of this site that is just very, very desirable is the extensive program of athletic fields. And that's something that we're very sensitive to. We understand that those athletic fields not only serve the school needs for the school athletics, but they also are a big resource for the school recreation department. And so, you know, again, we're looking at things that would be sensitive about as we develop the design, is to preserve those fields and enhance them where possible. So other aspects that are good. We talked about the green space. We talked about, you know, the athletic facilities. There's ample parking on the site, which is something that not all schools have nowadays. There's also some wonderful existing mature trees out there that we'd like to document and, whenever possible, that we'd like to preserve as we move forward. So these are the wonderful things about this property, and the context of it, it's so close to the center of town. It's within walking distance of the center of town. So it's just an incredible community resource. And that's why we like to start by looking at this from above. But now as we zero into the site, we can go to the next slide. So we've talked about what's good about the site, okay? And I always like to do that to start. But now we've got to talk about what are the site shortcomings. And as we've analyzed this site and looked at it and observed some of the circulation patterns and practices back in the spring, what we really see is a site that is coming to the end of its life cycle. And it's doing that in a number of ways. Number one, circulation patterns. As many people know and has been expressed to us by staff and faculty at the school, and from our own observations, the circulation patterns are not working particularly well right now. We have the entrance horseshoe, which again is a beautiful green space and a beautiful way to enter the site. But in the mornings, you have cars mixing with buses, which is a safety concern. And there's other elements like in the afternoon where there's parent pickup going through the parking lot. Those people can't get out of that are parked there, can't get out of their parking spaces. And if anybody has ever been to the northeast part of the site when students are leaving via that northeast driveway, there's nothing in that parking lot to direct people where to go. And it's a bit of a free for all. So we look at that from a circulation standpoint and have the circulation patterns that are necessary for a school in 2022. The school just can't seem to accommodate them right now with its current design. We also look at accessibility, which is very, very important. We want schools that are accessible to everyone. And when you look on site in terms of the distance of and some of the slopes of the accessible parking that we've seen out there, the pavement conditions of those accessible routes, lack of ramps up into certain doors, these are shortcomings of accessibility that we see really need to be improved. And again, when you look back at, when accessible design really became prominent, that wasn't too long ago. That was in the last 30 plus years ago. So, when you look at a site that dates back to the 50s and 60s and 70s, again, its life cycle has come. Also outdoor spaces for students. Modern schools, we want students to have incredible spaces. What am I doing? Please. We want students to have incredible outdoor spaces to collaborate. We want them to have outdoor spaces for dining, to mingle, to study. These are all ways that we can bring students outside the building and have them interact with nature. And a property like this with the resource areas is a great opportunity to do that. There's so much green space. But when we have, outdoor dining near dumpsters and things like that, there right now aren't the spaces dedicated to the student outdoors that we see as potential and that we'd like to see that students have. And then as is articulated in a lot of these photographs, simple materials, the materials and the utilities and other features on the site are just coming to the end of their lifespan. The pavements and driveways they've lived a long life and they've served many a car and bus, but they're simply just breaking down because they've been there for so long. So again, as we look at how to design the site moving forward, we take all these things into account, and we take them into account. And what we hope you see with some of the site studies that we've done to come is you can see the response to some of this analysis and to some of these observations.
Great, thank you, Eric. So again, I'm Christian with Jones Wetzel Architects. Thank you all for coming this evening. So as Gordon mentioned, we start off the feasibility study talking to the faculty, really getting a feel for the school, understanding the constraints, and really their vision and their goals for the next 20 to 50 years. while we're doing that visioning process, we're also looking at the existing conditions at the same time. And this is a slide that shows the footprint of the school compared to the MSBA state guidelines for sizes. The school was constructed in 3 different eras. I'm having the same, maybe it's our rings or something. The school was constructed in 3 different eras. So originally in 1950, and then an addition in the 60s, and then another addition in the 70s. And you can very much feel that when you're in the school. Certain spaces, particularly the locker rooms down by the gym and the pool, do feel a little bit like a labyrinth. In looking at the school, the sizes of the spaces very much match the approach to education from the time period in which it was built. So a school constructed in the 50s and 60s is very much students sitting in rows, all facing forward, a lot of rote memorization. Classrooms were smaller. Education these days is much different. As Gordon was mentioning, it's much more collaborative, it's much more group work. Flexible furniture is helpful because you're breaking students into groups. And so you can see some of those shortcomings in this slide here. So apart from the classrooms, the gymnasium is certainly undersized. For MIAA standards, you would like a gymnasium that can fit 2 full-size high school courts so they can both be practicing at the same time. The administration wing and nurse wing is drastically undersized. The kitchen is undersized. The cafeteria space is actually about meet standards, but it's split in half and it's very awkward to get from one half to the other. And then where you really feel it on the classroom wings is not just in the classrooms themselves, which are slightly undersized, but it's the science labs in particular. Those labs really want to be closer to about 1,400 square feet. And many of these are under 1,000 square feet. You want flexible furniture in there so you can have both a classroom setting and a lab setting. You can have the students transition from one to the other very easily. And that's certainly not possible with the current science labs. In terms of the condition of the building, the district has done an admirable job of maintaining the building both inside and out. There have been some updates that have happened over the years. Windows have been replaced for something hopefully more energy efficient, though of course now that even update has now been dated. The finishes are quite robust. We still have the pink glazed tile, whether you want to or not. What's really failing is the systems of the building at this point. So the roof you can see throughout is just not detailed correctly, where the membrane roof gets flashed up that adjacent wall high enough. So the school has chronic roof leaking problems, and you can see some of that evidence here with the little puddle on the left that might be a little bit hard to see, but recent damage that's happened in the school that is not something that you want your students or your staff to really have to deal with on a daily basis. The other one down here on the bottom left is a unit ventilator. And this is again 1950s, 60s technology. It provided both fresh air and heating or no cooling, but fresh air and heating to the classroom. It's almost impossible to find parts for these systems anymore. They don't provide enough ventilation. The ventilation requirements for classrooms has gone up 10 times since these were designed. They're incredibly loud. They don't meet the acoustic requirements necessary in modern classrooms. So there's just a lot of items like that where it's not a question of trying to keep it alive. It's really, as Eric was saying, with the site issues at the end of its useful life. Again, as Eric was mentioning, for accessibility, accessibility was not a topic in the 50s and 60s, and there are a lot of compliance issues within the existing school. And then again, to be expected of a school of the state, insulation, moisture control, there's a lot to be desired from the exterior envelope of the building. So I'm going to try and go through this a little bit quickly, and so that in hopes that we can open it up for questions and answers after, and have a little bit more time kind of walking around and posting some of your thoughts on the various boards that are around the room. But as a way of introduction, we've been working with the building committee to really try and come up with as many options, as many viable options as we can think of. So option one is a code upgrade kind of base repair option. So what if we just tried to bring the existing building up to code with all of today's codes, energy code, accessibility code, address all the hazardous materials, introduce a sprinkler system into the building, What if we just tried to address those and didn't address the educational program at all? Option 2 is looking at what if we do an addition renovation? What if we try and save a portion of the school and then do an addition as makes sense? Both options 3 and 4, we're looking at new schools, and at the end of the preliminary design program that Ben was referring to earlier, the building committee elected to really just kind of combine those into one. So we've really only brought one forward. And then on option 5 is a new school with a separate community facility a little bit closer to the track and the football field. So here in grayed out, you can see the options that we've kind of put behind us and the 4 that we're bringing forward both this evening and into our preferred schematic phase. And then the goal again is at the end of that preferred schematic to really have one of these to narrow in on. But the building committee was, I think, admirably cognizant of the fact that we wanted public input early in this process. I would say that on most school projects that we deal with, we usually get to that preferred schematic and then start the community outreach. And here we really wanted to try and gather input from the community as early as possible, even while there's all of these options being considered. So very quickly, the code upgrade, as I explained, was no changes to the interior plan, no changes to the educational pattern, but just bringing the school up to code. At Reno, in this case, we're looking at saving the auditorium and saving some of the classroom wings and looking at a new gym, cafeteria entry, and a new science lab on the western side of the school. And then new construction, much easier, much more flexible, easier to understand with a fully upgraded site as well. Oh no. Bizarre. Let's see why that's happening. Look at that, great, the site plan showed up. This is option 5, which you'll see on the board on kind of the far right back there. So this is looking at a new school that is placed on the site so that it avoids the footprint of the existing school. And that's so, as Ben mentioned, if an option like this was pushed forward, the new school could be built, the students could be moved into it, and then the existing school demolished. This is showing 2 different drop-off loops. And again, we're very early in the design process, so still some decisions to be made on what would be bus, what would be car, but definitely a desire to separate circulation as much as possible. In terms of the field space, we're trying to preserve as much of that open field as possible and also open up the field space to Maple Street so that as you come into the site, right now the field space is kind of hidden behind the building. You don't really know it's there. With this approach, you'll be able to see quite a bit of the site upon entering the site from Maple Street. In this particular version, we're showing no road connection to the northern street. We have heard a desire to have less car traffic going through that neighborhood, which certainly makes sense. So we've thought about preserving it for just emergency access. In this case, that is not maintained. It's that we just have a loop around the school. In terms of the floor plan, I'll just say we have a long way to go. We're very early in the process, but the building committee has toured a few new high schools and we've looked at a lot of different ideas. What's really stuck is the idea of a pod design for our classroom wings so that it has much more of a collaborative community neighborhood feel to it. So you see the classrooms arranged around an outer ring and some larger academic spaces in the center of that ring, daylit from above. And again, trying to get a sense of community within each of those academic wings. We have our academic wings oriented east-west, so we're really trying to capitalize on northern and southern light, which is much easier to control. So you have less glare issues and less overheating issues. We certainly can come back if there are questions. And again, feel free to post questions on the boards. I'm going to keep going here. Some of these have some similar similar concept. So 3C is pretty similar to option 5. In this one, the pool and the district offices are not separated as a separate community building, but feel much more attached to the building. There is a complication here in that the Massachusetts School Building Authority will not participate in a project that includes a pool. This is part of their effort to spread money as equitably as they can across the state. So some of their policies are quite frustrating, but there is there is some thought behind it. So in this case, the pool would have to be bid as a separate project, but would basically be constructed as closely to the existing school as possible. Here again, we have 2 separate loops in front of the building. In this version, the loops are brought a little bit closer to the front door. So there's a little bit more of a easy access from each of those loops. And here we are showing an emergency access lane from Norton Street. I should say on both of these options, we are also showing a possible connection to the bike path, as Eric mentioned earlier. This is a addition renovation option. Again, we're preserving the existing auditorium, which is slightly oversized for MSBA standards, so able to kind of refurbish that existing space and hold on to it. We are saving the academic wings here so that we are saving a more sizable footprint of the building. I will say that since pushing this option forward, we have been looking at it with our mechanical engineers, and it's going to be quite difficult and somewhat, I guess I would say, compromising to get new mechanical systems into that existing classroom wing because our floor-to-floor height is very low. It's about 11 feet from one floor to the other floor. And in modern construction, that's usually typically closer to 14 feet. And that's for all of that duct work and sprinklers and electrical that can go in that cavity space above the ceiling. We are showing a new kind of lab-oriented space, again, on the west side of the existing classroom wing. And then the gym that's undersized, the cafeteria that doesn't function very well, the administration wing that doesn't function very well and is undersized, all of that gets demolished and new construction on that side of the building. And then finally, the base repair. Again, the floor plan remains the same, but really just thinking about what would the costs amount to try and build that, to try and bring that existing school up to code. So we have done some very, very initial project cost estimates. We have a cost estimator from the design team involved from the very beginning phases of the project. They're very familiar with school construction in Massachusetts. So really at this point, this is really just looking at kind of gross square footage costs. And not really the ins and outs of the building, but they're able to give us at least an initial idea of what we can be expecting here. So we've simplified it, and what I should clarify here is the project cost number, how we have it listed here, includes everything. So it includes a new community building, if that's part of the site design, or a new pool, if that's part of the site design. It includes offices for the district administration, offices for LCAT, offices for IT needs that are all at the existing high school now. It also includes, designer fees, engineering fees, OPM fees. It includes furniture and fixtures and equipment, and it includes a certain amount of contingency, which Ben, of course, can speak to much better than I can if there are specific questions on that. But so that's all included under the overall project costs. And then we have the estimated grant amount from the MSBA. Again, that's a very early estimate because that there's so many particulars with the grant program. But that's an amount that we are carrying right now for the estimated grant. And then we get to the estimated local share at the bottom. So with 5B, it's between 125, 130 million, that ballpark. Option 3C, 120 and 125 million. The ad reno, about 115 to 120 million. And then the base repair, we wrote that down as unknown because that one is the most difficult to determine the MSBA grant amount. In general, I guess I would say the MSBA is interested in bringing schools up to date and up to code, but at the same time, if it doesn't satisfy your educational program and flexibility that the MSBA wants to see over the next 50 years, then they might not contribute towards that square footage. So with your undersized science classrooms, with your undersized administration, there's a high probability that the MSBA would not contribute towards those spaces in particular because they're not providing you with the flexibility that they think you will need in the long run. So some broad ranges, and we'd love for these numbers to be specific now, but we're so early in the process, it's hard to get more drilled down than this, but we at least wanted to start getting some of this estimated local share out there. I'm going to turn it over to Jill and also open it up for questions and answers. Maybe we'll have Jill describe the process a little bit first.
Okay, so you guys have been wonderful listeners, but now we want to switch things up and give us a chance to listen to you and your feedback and responses based on the initial schemes that we've been presenting. And we have, well, the way we were hoping to do that is we have a number of boards set up around the room. We might end up pulling those apart a little bit. We have one board for each of the schemes that Christian presented on. And we have two boards that are photos. One of the boards has photos of the existing high school, and then the other board shows some new high schools, newly opened high schools for comparison and for inspiration. So what we are hoping is that you all can get up and walk around and spend a little time looking at these. I know it's hard to see when it's up on the boards on the screen, so you can have a little bit more time to look at that. And the design team and the school building committee is going to be dispersed throughout the room, so you can ask questions there and get more information. And then we have sticky notes positioned by all of the boards. So if you see something that you like, grab a green sticky note and put your comment on it and stick it on the board. If you see something you don't like, grab a red sticky note and write your comment and put it on the board. We don't expect, paragraphs, but it is helpful to have a little bit of information about what it is you're responding to. If you see a picture you like, what is it that you like about it? So that'll be really helpful for us when we're trying to put together all of the feedback from this presentation and event. So before we do that, if there are questions, we can address to the whole group at once. That's, efficient. So we'll open it up for that first.
I have a logistical question for people that are watching online. Yeah, no problem. For people who are watching online, how can they provide feedback?
Great. So if you want to provide additional feedback, there is a website for this project and it is listed on the screen here. So you can get all of the information on the project is available on that site and also opportunities for providing feedback. Great question.
So based on the timeline, it looks like we're 5 years out from having a new school. Given the current challenges with the school, how would we describe whether or not the existing school is safe and healthy for our kids? And what will be done to improve the conditions between now and 2027?
Start. I have a mic. Thank you. Is that on? Test 1, 2. There we go. So currently, we still are maintaining the school, as I think both Ben, Christian, and Eric said. Some of the pictures that you saw that were up there were actually from this past week when we had that rainstorm. But we do have capital projects that have been approved and we move on. We work really closely with Mr. Fenney and the Department of Public Works. And we continue to act on any challenge that is inhibiting what we want to do on a daily basis. So that's what we do sort of in the short term. Your question was around now and any potential building. The timeline that they had actually was 2026. So you're looking at roughly 3.5 years down the road. But that what option we eventually select, that still remains to be seen.
Speak to the health. Is the school a healthy school for our kids to be in?
So the question was, is the school a healthy school for our kids to be in? Yes. So yes, you do have leaks. It's an old building. It's 62 years old, flat roofs. Unfortunately, no matter when you put them on, eventually, it's been my experience and being in a number of schools throughout my career that they do leak. We do periodic air testing. We not only are cleaning up pictures such as you saw from the other day rather quickly. We did that on purpose in terms of taking the picture because we wanted to show what are some of the current challenges that we face when we get a driving rainstorm. But we are consistently looking at how we make the school that we currently have safe and comfortable so that we can all operate within it on a daily basis. Welcome.
Good evening. I live in the neighborhood behind the school. I just wanted to thank you guys for hearing our concerns with the vehicular access. And I just want to hope we keep that in our thoughts as we move forward. But I had a question about the way the schedule works. So now we're in the PDP phase and we're going to the PSR phase. So these 4 options are going to be more thoroughly vetted through this phase. And then at the end of the PSR phase, we will have identified the one that we want to kind of charge ahead with. Am I understanding that correctly?
Absolutely.
So we're looking February or April of next year to identify which one of the 4 we like.
Yes, you actually presented that so well. You should probably be sitting up here.
My job?
That's the timeline.
I see some numbers up there for the final project costs. I know they're ballpark numbers. When do you guys think you're gonna have a firmer number on the cost of this project? And who's gonna decide what phase that we're gonna go into to bring it to the town people to vote on?
So we're gonna get another cost estimate at the end of our preferred schematic report phase. So once we've narrowed it down to one option, we're able to get into costs a little bit more then. Then we proceed into schematic design, and that really, that phase takes a long time, but that's because it is critical to the project, because how these projects work with the MSBA is at the end of schematic design, that sets your project budget for the rest of the project. So we will have 2 different cost estimators, one from the design team, one from the owner's project manager, evaluate that schematic design package. And that's really when we start, the rubber hits the road, I guess I would say, with the MSBA, and we really drill into the details of that project scope and budget agreement. Once that budget is set at the end of schematic design, that's the number that is voted on by the town. And again, it's continued throughout the process. So if the project goes forward and we go into design development and construction documents, we have additional cost estimates during that time period to make sure that we're tracking to that schematic design figure. And then eventually going out to bid to hit that same figure.
But you're comfortable with those numbers you're kind of giving up there, the overall cost, not what the reimbursement part of it, but the overall cost. It's pretty broad there, but you're probably gonna be on the high side of that, or?
We wish we could say, now is a very unique time in the construction industry. And so, and I guess, the world.
I guess what I'm looking at is how are you guys gonna financially look at this project and then what you're getting for the bang for your buck?
Right.
What's the best route?
Right.
I see a lot of head shaking here that new school is the way to go. But is that the best bang for everybody involved in the town, not just the school?
That is the question.
Right,
Yeah.
so the unknown factor you give there for the reimbursement on renovation.
Yeah.
There is a number out there. You should have an answer from the state before you even consider looking at all the projects. You should get a number from the state, what the reimbursement number might be. You know, they have done this before.
For the base repair.
Yeah,
We have
there's a number out there, right? They know what they're gonna kind of give you somewhat of a dollar figure for repairs.
we have tried to ask them for that number and then we have not been able to get it. What's difficult about getting that number for that base repair is that the MSBA has to do a very thorough review and compare that to your educational plan and look at where you want to be in 20 years versus what they're willing to fund. And so the amount of that estimated grant is just I'm sorry to be reporting this because we feel the same frustration, but that's what we have come to find.
But at the end of the day, it's gonna go before the town to vote, I take it, right?
Correct.
And if you give them the wrong project to vote on, don't get nothing from the townspeople versus giving them a better option. At that point, I'm just trying to figure, when do you guys cut off your options and say, this is what we're going for, and hopefully we're gonna, we're not gonna shoot ourselves in the foot, so to speak, because we asked for too much town people to understand.
Exactly.
Especially if they're not involved in this process like you guys have been throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Try to bring them up to speed on why it costs so much. Might be an overwhelming task for you guys. So if you overlook at the big option, you miss out on a little one that they might have bought into.
Right.
And the bang for the buck is always out there. There's other projects in the town that they're gonna be considering too, I'm sure, when they pull the lever.
Exactly.
So I just want you to keep in mind that when does it get cut off is my point.
Yeah,
You guys go for it.
Really, that is gonna get really determined at the end of the preferred schematic phase. So this February. So that's why we're here tonight and why we're gathering input now.
The only last comment I have is the estimated cost of the option one for the rehab only. What was that cost for that?
Right now, that project cost is coming in at 110 to 115 million.
Versus a whole 170 for a whole new school.
Correct.
I find those numbers too close together. It doesn't sound realistic to me.
Yeah, I think people are often surprised at how high that number is, but really it's a lot of work because it's not just fixing the building, it's bringing it up to code. So that includes current energy code. So the scope of that is quite considerable. New insulation, new roof, new insulation on the roof, new windows, probably new flooring throughout where there's asbestos flooring, new sprinklers installed in the building, addressing all of your accessibility concerns.
Then the construction type that goes out to bid to what you guys are putting up for actual materials. That's understanding with the townspeople as far as when you look at the projects. I mean, what I'm saying is the walls right now are brick and mortar, basically. How are you gonna get brick and mortar when you put a new school up? That's what the townspeople should understand.
Oh, you get a much better insulated brick and mortar.
Insulation's not my concern.
Okay.
Brick and mortar, that lasts forever.
I see. Yes.
Insulation
Yes.
doesn't.
No, we always want to build a school that will last at least 50 years. That's a requirement from the MSBA, and we're shooting for much longer than that.
I'm just going back to the days of Bursman Park. I don't know how many people, there's a lot of young faces here, but I'm not that young. Where Bursman Park was built like, it was built, and it took them a heck of a job to knock it down. You don't build it like that anymore. So I just want to understand that hopefully we're gonna get the same quality of school if we do decide to go do, as far as material wise. That comes at a cost.
Yeah, that's
I'll leave it at that.
okay.
I just have a question regarding the total dollar amount. Our contingency adds, because we know in construction that there's always going to be something that might come up. Is that added into that total project cost?
Yes, it is incorporated in that cost that you were seeing up there.
Okay, and I would just make one comment. I'm in commercial lending and I was just at an event today and we were talking about environmental issues. So thank you for the mom who's asked that question because I have a freshman. We have a freshman at the high school and just want to make sure that they are safe and that it is health-wise, it's that they're good. We're talking about whether you're doing a renovation versus a build. And sometimes folks don't get it, that it is more costly to do a renovation, and rather than just wipe it down and do it new. And that's where kind of those numbers, I agree, you know, it's close, but it just, a renovation doesn't always make sense.
So pile on the theme of renovation and just trying, we talked about on the options 3 and 5 that you would just kind of walk over into the new school, but what would that game plan look and feel like? Anybody who's lived through a renovation, but in terms of inside those schools, is what is that thought process? What's the impact of education, sports, community events, administrative offices, things like that?
That's a great point. So on that ad reno option on that 2C, I will say that, you know, it's coming in at a slightly lower dollar figure. What was interesting in seeing the cost estimates was that the building cost was pretty similar between the new and the reno, and it was really a savings on the site cost because we're not, you know, as drastically addressing the site. And then the project cost goes up a little bit higher because there are some of those phasing costs. So we are planning on, if we were to go forward with an option like that, we would need modular classrooms. And it would be a phased construction process so that the students would be in one part of the classroom wing while the other students are in the modulars, and then swapping across. The cost for those modulars is not reimbursed by the Msba. That's a cost that's borne just by the town. So that's included here with that estimated grant amount reflects that. But yes, it becomes more logistically complicated for sure.
I had a question. If you're going to be, no matter which way you go, do these projects, does the state allow you to plan for the future? I mean, the town keeps growing. We've outgrown the school at least 4 times in the last 60 years. How do you plan for providing for my kids' kids? They would be freshmen when the new school opens, and how allowing them to, you know, stay here and provide for the next generation or two. Is that included in here? Is the school going to be big enough to absorb another 15 or 20% increase in student size over the next 40 or 50 years?
Right, that's a great question. So the enrollment is set by the Msba, and so the size of the school is based off of that, and they're using birth rates and, you know, doing an independent study that is done as objectively as possible. So while the school is sized on that, I would say in general there's some flexibility there. The size of the school is not that different from the existing square footage of the school, but the types of spaces are so radically different. So you have much larger spaces, you have smaller breakout rooms. In general, all of your classrooms are larger. So you have more flexibility in the new design. So we have seen that generally schools can take about a 10% increase in the student population compared to what they're designed to, and just absorb that within the planning of the building. If it goes much beyond that, with all of these plans, you will have illustrated an area where the school could expand. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but once we get to that preferred schematic, we will show a space where the school can expand, so that if the district does need to do that down the road, that plan is pretty clear and able to do that.
My question is more from an athletic perspective. I heard y'all mention about a community facility, maybe closer to a football field and track. Is that like outdoor or bathrooms, real bathrooms, and not the porta potties? And so, and then what are we looking at in regards to like a facility for training or a set aside area for athletes to train and lift? Because what they have now is vastly it's bad shape. So is that being looked at too? Are we going to have an area that the kids can go and the athletes can train, and then bathrooms over by the other facility?
So with the new school, or with the new school or the ad reno, the gym gets quite a bit larger, right? It's about 12,000 square feet. There's also an alternative PE space And right now the district's considering kind of breaking that between a smaller alternative PE space that could be used for dance or yoga or something along those lines, as well as a weight room. So that's all considered part of it. And I would say that in all of these plans, other than the base repair, concessions, bathrooms, an accessible press box is all included as part of the scheme.
With the option 1 or option 2, with the projection of doing the full renovations or the bringing the base, whatever up to code, are you looking at the same projections of another 60-year building? Or would we be revisiting this in 15, 20 years?
Right, that's a great question. With the ad reno, again, structurally, that portion of the building is in pretty good shape. So yes, I think that it has some years to give, and I think that's where some of the savings that one might think of. I know in one school that we did that was an ad reno, we were able to save the drain lines from the plumbing was cast iron, and we scoped it and it was going to last forever, so we could keep it. But in another ad reno project, they scoped it and it was in terrible shape, and we had to replace all of the plumbing drain lines. So if we went down that path, that's the level of research that we would do into the building to make sure that all those systems could last that long.
Be able to put those two out there for people.
Exactly.
I just have a question. Is it my understanding that with option, the new schools, the 3 and the 5, that a new pool would not be included in that price, and that the community has to fund the cost of building that pool? Would the community be made aware as to how much that projected cost would be at the time it's being built? Would the pool be built at the same time? Or?
It's a great question, and it's become a bit, again, more complicated than we had hoped. So the pool, if it's bid independently, comes in at around $10 million, and that is included in this project cost that's shown on the slide here. It would likely be, it's considered a separate project. We're still not sure if they would be bid independently or if we could wrap them together or if they'd be bid at the same time. So some of those details are still to be worked out, but we have heard loud and clear that there's a desire for a new pool. And so far we're including that $10 million in that project cost.
Second vote.
And probably a second vote, right? It'd be 2 different voting processes.
Because there's been quite a bit of interest from the neighborhood near the school about the traffic, it appears like you obviously have given us some concern, and you mentioned possibly for the Northern Street part, maybe emergency use or something else. Can you share with us what you have in mind?
Sure. So we had thought about deliveries coming from that side. We had considered potentially staff parking coming from that side. Again, kind of before we had understood the concerns there. So all of that, I would say, is off the table. And now we're really just looking at an emergency access only through Northern Street, or nothing at all. In the as Eric mentioned, on the existing site, the deliveries are not really, the school isn't set up very well for deliveries to come in, and so that if a large truck has to come in, they're really parking in front and shepherding everything to the back of the school. And so we have adjusted our plans accordingly, thinking about deliveries being made off of Maple Street, a proper shipping and receiving area, loading dock, etc.
Christian?
It may be premature at this point, but when you guys are doing the project costing, do you have any sort of feel for the energy portion of those? I know they're not gonna be in the build spends, but you know, how much is it gonna cost us to heat and air condition the building using option 1 versus option 5 over the next 60 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. We will do a detailed life cycle analysis of the preferred option to do a comparison between option 1 and option 5. I guess I'd go on the record as saying option 5 will be better, but how much better is really hard to say. You know, with trying to insulate an existing building, you can do quite well. But you know, again, you just don't have as much design control as you do with a new design. So we unfortunately won't get to that level of being able to determine, you know, annual operating costs between these separate options. On the previous question on Norton Street, and Helen reminded me, we are doing a traffic study in the coming months. And so that will give us a much better feel for existing traffic conditions at Maple, and we have included that neighborhood to the west, as well as proposed implications.
Quick question, as in regards to the new build, is solar an option at all?
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, photovoltaics is not reimbursed by the Msba. So I guess I would just say from our previous experience, we have made sure that the school is solar ready. And from a structural point of view, from a you know, organizational and layout and solar access, conduit runs, all of that. And then really it's kind of up to the district or the town to see if they want to go the distance to make that happen.
Hi there, under the educational impact, the base repair, what sort of education are children receiving if they're in a modular as the students? I mean, that just doesn't seem like a good option to me. And in the option 5B, the estimated grant drops to 45. Is that because of the community building? From the option C where it says 48 million reimbursed? 60 million?
Yes, a lot of that is the community building, having that be separate from the rest of the school.
So on the educational impact, what is happening with those students and the base repair?
For the base repair, you have basically your existing conditions of your classroom now.
So they're undergoing education during renovation?
Oh, yes, certainly.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell them about
I had just two basic questions. One regarding your people talking, I don't happen to live in the neighborhood right on the school, so I guess I luck out in that regard, but with you're doing a traffic impact study through that neighborhood, are you also looking, or has there been one done for easing traffic in and out of the school itself, no matter which plan you use, as far as traffic lights at both exits and entrances? Like right now, there's only one light, but it's only at an entrance, which is mind-boggling.
Yes. We will definitely be looking at the traffic impacts on Maple and how to streamline that, you know, as best we can.
And just the other question, if you went with option 1, for instance, with the hazardous material reduction there, what are the impacts or risks associated with the students having to be in and around an area with asbestos being removed, or any other hazardous materials, mercury, flow lights?
They would be completely isolated from the project scope, but yeah, that would certainly be a concern.
Christian, I want to mention that we'll probably get non-reimbursable trailers.
I got just with the modular, especially if anybody else had concerns, but back in the day when I was in school, my high school was doing additions and all the classrooms were modular, or a good bit of classrooms were modular. And they had no negative impact on education. They're built just like regular classrooms. You're just off in a field. But other than that, it really doesn't have an impact.
Great.
Anybody else? I didn't mean to monopolize the microphone, but that's kind of how it goes when there's microphones. So the building committee and the design team in OPM, we are certainly here for questions. Please approach us. And if you want to take a walk around, and there are little Post-it notes there besides kind of on every little flat surface we could find, as well as some pens. And so if you have any thoughts or considerations, if you could just slap them on the boards there so that we can record those and gather your input. That'd be
I'd
really
just
helpful.
like to say